Last thing that I want to realize is this, is God never loses sight of what's ahead. David was always going to be king. No matter the process, he was going to be king. Can I say this? God never forgets our call. We may go through hell and upside down circumstances and situations that we can't control and people we can't control and the things we can't control. But I want to tell you, God never forgets, never lose sight of what he's called us to do, never. And he's committed to that process of bringing us there. In the midst of our mistakes, in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of all those things, I've said this many times before, our failures qualify us for success. Sometimes the hardest, or sometimes the simplest truth is the hardest to grasp. Sometimes it's the hardest to grasp. He never forgets. He never gets off track. And the more I know him, the more he reveals himself to us, the more his truth becomes a reality and the circumstances around us doesn't dictate what we do. I believe this: God has empowered every one of us to be overcomers, no matter what's in front of us. Some of you might have to face a huge business decision. Sometimes you have to face things in your family. Sometimes there's things that are just seeming to slip away. I'm telling you, I want to speak to you. God never forgets what he's given you. He never forgets what he's called you to. He never forgets and loses focus or loses sight of that. Our challenge is we need to learn in that process to take the simplest truth and not make them hard. Begin to worship in the midst of it. Begin to give thanks when the circumstances seem it's impossible. We begin to rejoice because we know that the picture is much bigger than what we see. Even though it's hard, there's things that we can overcome because of the truth that God has put into our life. Sometimes the simplest truth is the hardest to grasp. I want to say this. Life isn't always predictable, but man, we can make the most of it. We can make the most of it. Is it going to be hard? Yeah. But we can make the most of it. Make the most of it. With everything, there's a process. Don't ever think God is destroying you. He never is. Building us to be the men and women he's designed us to be. We've got to learn to accept it sometimes and just go with it, because the moment we try to control it, we lose it. And I ask you a question: how hard is it to control the next person? Man, we manipulate, we twist, and we turn, we threaten, and we say things, and we put pressure on all these things. Because we want what we want. And when we don't get it, we fight for it. Everything is a process. It's learning to let go. We begin to experience freedom. We begin to let go. We experience freedom. And lastly, God never loses sight of what's ahead. We might get overwhelmed. We might get overcome, but God never does. He never does. And if we learn to stick with him, it's always going to turn out all right.